With the launch of Prismatic in the final shape, we are going to have access to some crazy options with build crafting. A couple of them I'm very excited for. So I decided to put together 3 starting builds that you can take immediately into the legendary campaign. The reason I can suggest these is because we already know the starting fragments, aspects, abilities, and supers that we'll be getting as soon as we have access to Prismatic. From the previews and a bunch of other creators that have had a chance to look at the game, we know that we'll unlock more of the Prismatic subclass as we play the campaign. So if you find an ability or an aspect that you like, feel free to swap around these builds afterwards. We have 3 here, 1 for each class, so let's dive into it. Before we jump in, I want to give a quick shout out to Corp Projects that designed this amazing infographic that I've pulled a bunch of the fragments from to be able to showcase the Prismatic versions of them. The link to their socials are in the description, so go and give them a follow because this wouldn't be possible to showcase in the video without their infographic. So shout out to them. Let's jump on to the rest of the video. First of these builds is for Titan, the guys that love to punch and destroy everything with their fists. The 2 aspects that you're going to have access to start out is Knockout and Diamond Lance. Knockout is usually reserved for arc things, but in this case we're going to be using melees across all of the different abilities, and when it procs you get increased melee range and an increased melee damage by 50% for 6 seconds. Defeating targets with melee attacks does give you some health regeneration to start out, and then also makes you amplified. Pairing this with Diamond Lance, shattering or defeating targets with stasis abilities or weapons creates a stasis lance. In this instance, because we'll be on Prismatic, the arc abilities or whatever you have to use, in this case we have Frenzy Blade or Thunderclap, will be able to create stasis lances or diamond lances in this case. They will freeze on impact, or you can slam them and they'll go into a small area. This is going to be good because you're going to have the effects of the buff that we've just had to Diamond Lance, which increases their pickup radius and the radius of the impact area, basically, that freezes things. For our abilities, we do have access to Thunderclap and Frenzy Blade. In this instance, I'm going to be using Thunderclap because I'm going to be comparing this with an exotic. For our super, we are going to be using Thunder Crash, but you can also use Blade Fury if you really want to. And then for our grenades, we're going to be choosing to go with a Pulse Grenade, but you can also go with a Shackle Grenade if you want to. It's down to you. The exotic that we are pairing with this build is going to be Point Contact Braces. The way that this exotic works is when you use Thunderclap melee, it restores your melee energy. So if you charge it all the way up, and then put out your strikes, you'll be able to jolt enemies while also being amplified. You're going to increase the lightning strikes of these areas as well. And then pairing this with our Diamond Lance aspect means we're going to be able to freeze everything, go into knockout, punch everything as well, and then be able to continue this loop, being able to charge up, punch again, and have a lot of fun punching everything in the vicinity. The only downside to these starting builds is that they all have the same fragments, but they are going to be very good. So I'm going to read off the descriptions for the first build, and then you'll basically know which ones we're going to be having for the second and third. We have Facet of Dawn, which is powered melee hits against targets make you radiant. Powered melee final blows makes both you and your nearby allies radiant. So we already have a buff going there whenever we use our Thunderclap. We have Facet of Ruin. This increases the size of the damage and burst when you shatter a stasis crystal or frozen target, and increases the size of solar ignitions. This is going to work for our stasis Diamond Lance and all of our frozen enemies. We have Facet of Purpose, which is picking up an orb of power, grants either amplified, restoration, frost armor, woven mail, or overshield based on the type of damage you have with your super. So if you wanted to go with Blade Fury, you could, and basically get yourself a extra damage resistance, which we might do if you want to have that choice. Facet of Protection, while surrounded by enemies, you are more resistant to incoming damage. This is going to be very good as just a general use fragment. And then Facet of Hope, while you have an elemental buff, your class ability regenerates more quickly. In this case, we're going to be just flying around the battlefield with our thruster, so this is going to be a very good combo. Some other things that you can potentially do here is run Sidiceps and go more Blade Fury, It's entirely down to how you want to play. And what I will do is I'll leave a dim link to the mods, but I'll put them on screen right now for you to follow for this build. The next class we have is my favorite, which is the Warlock. I've always been a Warlock main, and we are going to have access to the aspects Feed the Void and Bleak Watcher, two of my favorite aspects in the game. Feed the Void basically allows Void abilities to grant Devour. This is going to work across all of your damage, so this is going to proc quite quickly. It means you're going to get health regeneration all the time from Devour, so very good. We also have Bleak Watcher, which is when you hold a grenade, you are able to create a stasis turret and lock down a whole area. So already you're going to be able to control a room with Bleak Watcher turrets and also Feed the Void with the Devour. We're also going to be pairing this with the abilities Pocket Singularity and the Cold Snap Grenade for that light and darkness kind of play. We do have access to some other abilities such as Penumbral Blast, which I don't really want to use here. I don't think it's that good. I would also recommend Phoenix Dive for that little burst of healing. And for your super, you're going to be using Nova Bomb because you do have Winter's Wrath, but I think Nova Bomb is just going to be good for any problem bosses that you run into. For this specific build, we are going to be pairing the Ozymancy gloves, so we get ourselves 2 Cold Snap grenades, which means we have more turrets available to us. This is going to be good because we have more control, and then we're going to be able to generate more orbs and kind of play into our fragments as well. The key fragment that you need to pay attention to here is Facet of Ruin, which is increasing the size of a stasis crystal and a frozen target, like the burst that you have. Then there's also Facet of Purpose, which is going to give you frost armor if you are using the Winter's Wrath, or you're going to be able to get yourself an overshield if you pick up an Orb of Power, so more damage resistance there. And then you have Facet Protection for more overall stuff. And then also Facet of Hope. If you have an elemental buff, your class ability regenerates more quickly. And because we're going to be using Penumbral Blast, we're going to be able to make ourselves Radiant. So a lot of fun to be had there. Great control in health regeneration and survivability. I can't wait to try this class out. And last but certainly not least, we're going to be talking about the Hunter. They have access to Winter Shroud and Starless Executioner to start out. Winter Shroud basically gives you a dodge that slows enemies in like a area around you, which is going to be good when we once pair it with Starless Executioner, which is defeating any debuffed enemies makes you invisible. So because they are slowed, you're going to be able to pair them quite nicely and essentially have like almost permanent invisibility. For our abilities, we have access to Swarm Grenade and also Duskfield Grenade. I recommend going with Duskfield Grenade here because it kind of plays into that debuff mindset, and you can then obviously proc Starless Executioner. Swarm Grenade might be pretty good, but I think it's going to be worth going with that there. And you could go with either Knife Trick to be able to fan out some knives at stuff, or you can go with Withering Blade and have more options for melee available, more slows. But once again, it's down to personal preference. For our super, I have chosen to go with Silence and Squall, but you can go with Golden Gun here. It is entirely up to you. Just more slowing of things down allows for more invisibility, so you have more uptime. And this is where we actually have a lot of options available to us. You can either go with exotics such as Foe Tracer to increase that stasis damage, or you can go with 6 Coyote to get double dodges and also allow yourself to get Reaper with the new buffed. Or if you use a Void weapon, you can go with Gear Falcon's Halberg and use that to get yourself some volatile rounds on your weapons. For the fragments, they are the same once again. You're going to be able to use Facet of Dawn this time to make yourself radiant and have a buff going. You'll also be able to have that Facet of Protection to be able to keep you alive when surrounded by a lot of enemies, so you can do your dodging. You can have Facet of Hope, so you can get yourself an elemental buff and regenerate that class ability energy, so it's going to be really synergistic with our first fragment that we just mentioned, Facet of Dawn. And then also you're going to be able to freeze enemies and shatter those crystals with Facet of Ruin, and get yourself Frost Armor when you pick up an Orb of Power because you have Silence and Squall on. And once again, I'll leave the mods on screen along with the dim link to just the mods only, so you can have them equipped ready for when you put this class on. Now, obviously, these are theory crafted. We're going to have to get into the game and see how these all interact with one another, and also the exotics, but I'm pretty confident after watching a bunch of the preview gameplay from some of the other creators that these are going to work. And oh boy, I have some very exciting things that I'm going to be doing with all of the classes, so I think I'll be making build videos for quite a while. And if you've enjoyed watching this video and you want to stick around for more content that's not just Destiny related, but you want to stick around for those build videos, leave a like on the video, subscribe if you're new, and come and check out the streams where we'll be playing Final Shape all this week, talking about all the new stuff and basically reacting to everything live, and then jumping into the raid later on in the week. And as always, this has been Jimbo, and I'll see you guys next time.